The Galactic Academy lecture hall hummed with the gentle whir of anti-gravity desks and the excited murmurs of first-year students. Holographic bestiaries flickered above each station, displaying rotating images of creatures classified as Deathworld specimens, biological horrors that had evolved on the most hostile planets in known space. Lyra Vance slid into her seat, feeling the familiar twinge of not quite belonging. Unlike most of her classmates who hailed from established core worlds, Lyra had grown up on Elysia, a peaceful garden planet where the most dangerous predator was a flower that gave you a mild rash if you touched its petals. Her acceptance to the Academy's prestigious xenobiology program had been both a dream come true and a cultural shock. 3 months into her freshman year, she still felt like an outsider among the bold, adventure-seeking students who dominated her cohort. "You look nervous," said a quiet voice beside her. Lyra turned to see Eno, her lab partner, settling into the adjacent desk. Eno was even more of an oddity than she was, rarely speaking in class, keeping to themselves during social hours, but somehow excelling at every practical assignment without apparent effort. "Just tired," Lyra lied, adjusting her data tablet. "I was up late studying the carnivora classification from Terran origins." Eno nodded with that peculiar, too-precise head movement they always made. Fascinating adaptations, teeth and claws, simple but effective. Before Lyra could respond, the lecture hall doors slid open with a pneumatic hiss, and Professor Carrick strode in. The xenobiology lecturer carried himself with the confident swagger of someone who had survived multiple expeditions to uncharted worlds. His right arm, a high-end prosthetic replacement after a close encounter with something venomous on a jungle planet, gleamed under the hall's bright lights. "Good morning, future xenobiologists," Carrick announced, his voice carrying easily through the acoustic-enhanced space. "Today, we move beyond theoretical classification and venture into practical observation." He gestured dramatically toward the center of the room, where a sealed metallic cylinder rose from the floor. "Behold, a privilege few Academy students have experienced, a live specimen of Deathworld monster number 37. A collective gasp rippled through the hall. Lyra felt her heart rate quicken. Live specimens were rare. Most xenobiology programs relied on holograms and simulations for obvious safety reasons. "Is that containment rated for Class 9? Called out a voice from the back of the hall. Jax Morrell, self-appointed daredevil of their cohort, leaned forward in his seat with a grin that suggested he was hoping the answer was no. Professor Carrick matched Jax's smile with a knowing smirk. "Mr. Morrell, this containment unit is rated for Class 12 entities. Our specimen is merely a 9. We have redundant systems, bioscanners, and emergency protocols. The Academy Board would never permit anything less." Lyra studied the containment pod with growing unease. The cylindrical chamber stood about 2 meters tall, its surface covered in sensor arrays and biometric scanners. A soft blue force field hummed around it, creating a secondary barrier. It all looked impressive, certainly, but something about the setup bothered her. The field's color seemed to fluctuate slightly, pulsing in irregular patterns that didn't match standard containment protocols. "Professor," she began, raising her hand tentatively, "the field harmonics seem—" "We'll have time for questions after the demonstration. Miss Vance," Carrick cut her off with a dismissive wave. "Now, gather around, but maintain the 6-meter safety perimeter." The students rose from their desks, excitement palpable as they formed a wide circle around the containment unit. Lyra hung back, noticing that Eno, too, seemed reluctant to approach, their usually impassive face showing what might have been concern. "Today's specimen," Carrick continued, activating a holographic display that showed a shadowy, sinuous creature with multiple limbs, "is particularly fascinating because of its adaptive camouflage capabilities. evolved on XZ79, a planet with such extreme radiation and atmospheric toxicity that our survey teams require specialized exosuits just to collect samples. The hologram rotated, showing a creature that seemed to shift and blur even in the digital representation. Its form was vaguely humanoid, but with elongated limbs and what appeared to be multiple joint articulations that would allow it to move in ways no human could. XZ79's native life developed extraordinary survival mechanisms, Carrick explained, his voice taking on the passionate tone he reserved for his favorite subjects. This specimen can alter its biosignature to mimic other life forms, rendering it effectively invisible to standard scanners. Additionally, its outer dermis can change color and texture, allowing visual camouflage against any background. "How did they catch it if it's so good at hiding?" Jax called out, his tone suggesting he doubted the creature was as formidable as described. Carrick's prosthetic arm whirred as he gestured toward the containment field. "An excellent question, Mr. Morell. The capture team used thermal gradient traps after establishing that the species cannot mask its heat signature during periods of rapid movement. This particular specimen was immature when captured 3 years ago and has been studied at the Central Research Facility until being transferred here for educational purposes." Lyra frowned as she studied the containment field more carefully. There, a momentary flicker in the lower quadrant, almost imperceptible but definitely present. The field was destabilizing in microscopic bursts, and something else caught her attention, a soft rustling sound from behind one of the room's diagnostic screens, like something brushing against the surface. "Professor," she tried again, raising her voice slightly, "I think there might be a problem with—" "Miss Vance?" Carrick sighed, clearly annoyed at the interruption. "If you're concerned about safety protocols, I can assure you that I've personally overseen every aspect of this demonstration. Your Garden World caution is noted but unnecessary." Several students chuckled, and Lyra felt her cheeks burn. Jax turned to give her a patronizing smile. "Scared of shadows, Vance? Maybe you should have stuck to studying flowers." "Fear is a natural response to apex predators," Eno interjected unexpectedly, their voice flat yet somehow forceful. "Survival instinct should not be mocked." Jax rolled his eyes. "Whatever, weirdo." Professor Carrick cleared his throat, reclaiming the class's attention. "Let's proceed with the demonstration. I'll activate the interior illumination to give you a better view of our guest." He tapped a sequence into the control panel on his tablet, and the cylindrical pod's opaque exterior became transparent, revealing a murky green preservation fluid within. Floating in the center was nothing. Carrick frowned, tapping the controls again. "That's odd. The containment sensors indicate the specimen is present." "Maybe it's just really good at that camouflage thing," suggested a student near the front. "Impossible," Carrick muttered, his confidence wavering for the first time. "The preservation fluid contains bioluminescent markers that would adhere to any solid mass within. It should be clearly visible regardless of the creature's camouflage abilities." Lyra felt a chill run up her spine as she glanced around the room. The rustling sound had stopped, but now she noticed something else, a subtle distortion in the air near one of the exit doors, like heat waves rising from hot pavement. She'd seen similar visual artifacts in nature documentaries about predators with light-bending adaptations. "Professor," she said firmly, no longer raising her hand, "I think the specimen has escaped containment." A tense silence fell over the lecture hall. Carrick's face hardened as he rapidly worked his control panel. "Impossible," he repeated, but with less conviction. "The biosensors show—" "Wait." He paused, frowning at the readings. "This can't be right. The sensors are registering 24 human life signs in this room." "Aren't there 23 students plus you?" Eno asked, their voice unnaturally calm. A collective realization swept through the room. followed by nervous glances and a few stifled gasps. "Nobody move," Carrick ordered, his professional demeanor cracking slightly as he activated his emergency communicator. "Security Protocol Theta 93, possible containment breach in Xenobiology Lecture Hall C." No response came from the communicator. Carrick tried again, his prosthetic hand clenching into a fist. "Security, respond! This is not a drill!" The silence that followed was broken only by the soft hum of the now empty containment pod and the increasingly rapid breathing of frightened students. "The communications must be down," Carrick said, trying to maintain control of the situation. "Everyone remain calm. The security system will automatically detect the breach and initiate lockdown procedures." As if on cue, the hall's lighting shifted to a deep amber, but the expected alarm remained silent. No automated voice announced emergency protocols. No reinforced barriers slid into place over the exits. "Something's wrong with the security system," Lyra said, voicing what everyone was thinking. "Professor, if this creature can alter its biosignature to mimic humans, it could have hacked into the Academy systems," Carrick finished grimly. "These specimens have demonstrated problem-solving intelligence, but nothing that would suggest technological manipulation capabilities." "Unless you underestimated it," Jack said, no longer smirking. "What else can this thing do that you might have gotten wrong?" Before Carrick could answer, the lights flickered and then went out completely, plunging the lecture hall into darkness. Emergency lighting activated seconds later, casting everything in an eerie blue glow. "Everyone stay together," Carrick commanded. "We're going to proceed calmly to the emergency exit. The creature cannot harm all of us at once, and security will respond to the power anomaly." Lyra felt something brush against her arm and nearly screamed before realizing it was just Eno moving closer. "Follow the professor," Eno whispered. "Stay in the group." The students clustered together, moving as a nervous herd toward the exit Carrick indicated. Lyra noticed that Eno kept slightly apart, watching the group rather than joining it fully. The professor reached the door first and placed his hand on the biometric scanner. Nothing happened. "Override failure," the door's automated system announced in a pleasant voice. "Biometric signature does not match authorized personnel." "That's absurd," Carrick snapped, trying again. "I used this same door 30 minutes ago." Lyra's mind raced. If the creature could manipulate technology and mimic biosignatures, could it have somehow altered the security system's recognition parameters? That would suggest an intelligence far beyond what had been documented. A scream from the back of the group shattered her thoughts. A student, Lyra recognized her as Talia from astrochemistry, was pointing at an empty space near the abandoned containment pod. "I saw it," Talia shrieked, "just for a second, like a shadow moving by itself." Chaos erupted as students pushed and shoved, no longer listening to Carrick's calls for order. Jax, surprisingly, stepped forward and raised his voice above the panic. "Everyone shut up," he bellowed with unexpected authority. "Panicking is exactly what this thing wants. We need to think." The group quieted somewhat, looking to Jax with desperate hope. "Vance," he said, turning to Lyra, "you noticed the containment problem first. What else do you know about this specimen?" Lyra swallowed hard, trying to recall everything she'd read about XZ-79's ecosystem. The file mentioned thermal signatures. It can't hide its heat when moving quickly. "The lab next door has thermal imaging equipment," Carrick said, regaining some composure. "If we can access it." "The doors are locked, Professor," a student interrupted. "How do we get out of here?" "Manual override," Eno suggested quietly. "Emergency systems have physical backups in case of technology failure." Carrick nodded. "Correct. There's a manual release panel behind the lecture podium. We can use it to override the door locks." As the group moved toward the podium, Lyra noticed Eno hanging back again, watching. Something about their movement seemed different, more fluid. less constrained by normal human joint limitations. A terrible suspicion began forming in her mind. "Professor," she whispered, pulling Carrick aside, "how long has Eno been in our class?" Carrick frowned. "Student Eno transferred in about 3 weeks ago, I believe. Excellent academic record from the Outer Rim Educational Collective. Why do you ask?" 3 weeks ago, Lyra repeated. "When was the specimen transferred to the academy?" Carrick's eyes widened as he made the connection. 25 days ago. But that's impossible. All transfer students undergo thorough bioscans, which wouldn't detect a creature that can mimic human biosignatures, Lyra concluded, her blood running cold. "Professor, I think Eno is—" A sudden commotion interrupted her. Jax had reached the manual override panel and was working to open it when the panel cover suddenly slammed back into place, nearly crushing his fingers. "What the hell?" he exclaimed, jumping back. The panel cover began to distort, its metallic surface rippling like liquid. As the stunned class watched, the cover stretched and twisted, extending outward in a vaguely limb-like protrusion. "It's in the systems," Carrick breathed, horrified understanding dawning on his face. "It's not just mimicking a student, it's integrated with the academy infrastructure." "No," Lyra corrected, her eyes fixed on Eno, who was now standing perfectly still at the edge of the group. "It's doing both." All eyes turned to Eno, who met Lyra's gaze with an expression that was no longer quite human. Their eyes reflected the emergency lighting oddly, pupils contracting to pinpoints, then expanding again in a rhythm no human biology could produce. "Very observant. Lyra Vance," Eno said, their voice suddenly different, deeper, with a resonant quality that made the air vibrate uncomfortably. "I had hoped to complete a full academic cycle before being discovered. Your species provides such fascinating data." Jax lunged toward a piece of equipment, a heavy specimen analyzer, clearly intending to use it as a weapon. Before he could reach it, Eno moved with impossible speed, crossing the room in a blur that left after images in Lyra's vision. One moment Eno was standing near the door, the next they were beside Jax. A hand, now elongated into something with too many joints, clamped around his wrist. "Violence is unnecessary," Eno stated calmly. "I have no interest in harming any of you." "Then what do you want?" Carrick demanded, his prosthetic arm whirring as combat subroutines activated automatically in response to the threat. Eno tilted their head in that distinctive, too precise way. "Knowledge, experience, understanding your species. You study us as monsters while knowing nothing of our cognition, culture, or capabilities." Lyra's scientific curiosity momentarily overcame her fear. "You're sentient, fully conscious." "Obviously," Eno replied, releasing Jax's wrist. "As are all species from what you call XZ79. We name our world differently." "This changes everything about our classification system," Carrick murmured, his academic interest clearly battling with his fear. "If Deathworld species possess advanced intelligence—" "Professor," Jax interrupted harshly, "maybe science can wait until we're not trapped with a predator?" Eno's form rippled slightly, the human appearance becoming less defined around the edges. "Your fear biochemistry is fascinating but unnecessary. Had I wished to harm you, there have been 394 optimal opportunities since my containment failure." "The containment pod," Lyra realized. "You were never in it, were you? The Academy thought they were receiving a specimen, but you were already free." "Correct," Eno confirmed. "The pod contained only preservation fluid. I accompanied the transport vessel, studying your security protocols. Infiltrating your educational system seemed the most efficient method to learn about your species." The lecture hall doors suddenly slid open, startling everyone. Eno gestured toward the exit. "You may leave if you wish. I have disabled the automatic security alerts, but manual alarms remain functional." The students looked uncertainly between Eno, Professor Carrick, and the open doors. "This is a trap," Jax asserted. "It wants to pick us off in the corridors." Eno's approximation of a human face displayed what might have been amusement. "Inefficient, if separated. You would alert others before I could subdue multiple targets." Lyra studied Eno carefully. Despite the obvious danger, her scientific mind was processing everything she observed. The creature was intelligent, logical, and seemed to have a code of behavior that didn't align with the monster classification it had been given. "What happens if we contact security?" she asked. "They'll try to capture or kill you." "Most likely," Eno agreed, "which would be unfortunate. My research is incomplete, and I have no desire for conflict." Professor Carrick stepped forward, his academic interest clearly overcoming his caution. "What if we offered an alternative, a formal research exchange? You clearly have much to teach us about your species, and perhaps there are things we could teach you as well." Eno's form stabilized, becoming more human-like again. "An interesting proposal. Would your authorities agree to such an arrangement?" "If properly presented, yes," Carrick nodded. "The Academy's primary mission is knowledge acquisition. A sentient representative of a previously misclassified species would be an unprecedented opportunity." Lyra noticed several students inching toward the open doors, while Carrick kept Eno engaged in conversation. Jax, surprisingly, remained in place, his eyes darting between the creature and the exit, as if calculating something. "I propose a demonstration of good faith," Carrick continued. "Release your control over the Academy systems, and I will personally advocate for a diplomatic approach rather than security containment." Eno seemed to consider this, their head tilting in that characteristic way. "Acceptable, but I require assurance of safety during negotiations. The Xenobiology Department has diplomatic protocols for first contact scenarios," Carrick explained. "They've never been used within Academy grounds before, but the procedures exist." As they spoke, Lyra noticed a subtle change in the air circulation. The ventilation system had activated at maximum capacity, creating a gentle but persistent current flowing toward the ceiling ducts. She glanced up and saw the emergency fire suppression system's nozzles rotating to align with Eno's position. Someone, likely security, alerted by the students who had escaped, was preparing to flood the room with cryofoam, a rapid hardening substance used to contain biological threats. "Eno," she said quickly, the name feeling strange now that she knew it wasn't a real student. "They're going to try to freeze you. The ventilation." Eno looked up, their form instantly losing all human pretense as it stretched and contorted. What had been arms elongated into whip-like appendages that lashed toward the ceiling vents. The creature moved with such speed that it seemed to be in multiple places at once, a blur of motion that the human eye could barely track. Alarms finally blared throughout the lecture hall. Red emergency lighting replaced the blue, and a computerized voice announced, "Biohazard containment protocol initiated. All personnel evacuate immediately." "Run!" Carrick shouted to the remaining students. "Get out now." Lyra hesitated, torn between self-preservation and scientific fascination. The creature that had been Eno was now fully revealed, a sinuous, multi-limbed entity with a body structure unlike anything in the Academy's classification system. It moved like liquid given form, flowing around obstacles rather than navigating them. Jax grabbed her arm. "Vance, move it! This isn't the time for research notes." As they ran for the exit, Lyra glanced back to see Eno creature rippling up a wall toward a maintenance access panel, clearly intending to escape through the Academy's infrastructure. Cryofoam began spraying from the ceiling nozzles, hardening instantly as it contacted surfaces. They barely made it through the doors before the emergency containment barriers slammed down, sealing the lecture hall. In the corridor, Security personnel in heavy protective gear were directing students toward decontamination chambers. "Did everyone get out?" a security officer demanded, her voice muffled by her helmet. "I think so," Jax answered, still holding Lyra's arm. "But the creature, it's not what we thought. It's intelligent. It can talk." "Save it for debriefing," the officer cut him off. "Standard procedure for all biocontainment events. Move to Decon 3, both of you." As they were herded toward the decontamination chambers, Lyra's mind raced. The cryofoam wouldn't hold something as adaptable as Eno for long. And if it could integrate with the Academy's systems, "It's going to escape into the maintenance tunnels," she whispered to Jax. "The foam is just a temporary obstacle for something that can change its physical structure." Jax nodded grimly. "Security doesn't understand what they're dealing with. Standard containment won't work." "We need to find it before they do," Lyra decided. "If security corners it, someone will get hurt. It doesn't want to harm anyone, but it will defend itself." "And how exactly do we find a shape-shifting alien that can disappear into the walls?" Jax asked skeptically. An idea formed in Lyra's mind. The thermal signature. If we can get to the biolab, there's equipment that can track heat patterns through solid objects. We might be able to follow it. "You want to chase after the Deathworld monster, voluntarily?" Jax stared at her like she'd lost her mind. "I thought you were the cautious one." "It's not a monster," Lyra corrected firmly. "It's a sentient being trapped in a hostile environment, trying to understand us. If security treats it like a mindless predator, this will end badly for everyone." Jax hesitated, then sighed. "Fine, but if we get expelled for this, I'm blaming you entirely." The decontamination process was brief but thorough. A full-body scan followed by a decontamination field that left their skin tingling. The security officer instructed them to remain in the holding area until debriefing teams arrived, then moved on to process other students. "Now's our chance," Lyra whispered, eyeing the exit. "The biolab is 2 levels down." "Security will be all over this section," Jax pointed out. "We'll never make it unnoticed." Lyra glanced around the holding area and spotted what she needed, a maintenance terminal built into the wall. "I have an idea. You're good with systems, right? That's why Professor Threll lets you get away with skipping half his computational biology classes." Jax grinned despite the situation. "I may have certain skills. Can you access the security overlay from that terminal? We need to know where they're deploying personnel." While Jax worked on the terminal, Lyra kept watch. The holding area was gradually filling with shaken students and faculty from nearby classrooms, all evacuated as a precaution. In the confusion, their actions went unnoticed. "Got it," Jax announced quietly. "They've established a perimeter around the xenobiology section and are conducting a systematic sweep outward. The maintenance tunnels are being sealed sector by sector." Lyra studied the security display over his shoulder. "They're assuming it's still in the vicinity of the lecture hall, but if it's as intelligent as it seems, it would go in the opposite direction," Jax finished, "away from the highest concentration of security." "The biolab should be clear," Lyra decided. "Everyone's been evacuated from that sector. We need to get there before security expands their search perimeter." They slipped out of the holding area, using the emergency evacuation confusion as cover. The corridors were eerily empty, emergency lighting casting everything in a red glow. Automated announcements periodically advised all personnel to proceed to designated safe zones. "This is officially the stupidest thing I've ever done," Jax muttered as they descended an emergency stairwell, "and I once tried to surf on a maintenance drone." "You can leave if you want," Lyra offered, though she hoped he wouldn't. Despite his bravado, Jax had proven surprisingly level-headed during the crisis. And miss the chance to make first contact with a sentient Deathworld species? Not a chance. Vance. They reached the biolab level without encountering security. The laboratory doors were locked, but Jax made quick work of the emergency override. "Should I be concerned that you're so good at breaking Academy security?" Lyra asked as the doors slid open. Jax winked. "Probably, but it's coming in handy now, isn't it?" The biolab was state-of-the-art, filled with equipment for analyzing and cataloging xenobiological specimens. Lyra headed straight for the thermal imaging station, powering up the sensitive scanners designed to detect minute temperature variations. "What's the plan if we actually find this thing?" Jax asked, rummaging through equipment cabinets. "I'm not seeing any how to peacefully approach a Deathworld predator manuals around here." "We need to establish communication," Lyra said, adjusting the scanner settings. "Convince it that we want to help negotiate a peaceful resolution." "And how do we do that without getting eaten?" "It had 3 weeks to eat any of us," Lyra pointed out. "It chose to study us instead. That suggests curiosity rather than predatory intent." The thermal scanner came online, displaying a 3-dimensional map of the surrounding area. Most sections showed the cool blue of unoccupied space, with occasional yellow-red hotspots, indicating security personnel moving through distant corridors. "Nothing unusual showing up," Jax observed. "Maybe it can mask its heat signature after all." "Or maybe it's not moving quickly," Lyra suggested, expanding the scan radius. "It seemed to understand our technology well enough to know we might try tracking it this way." After several minutes of scanning, a peculiar thermal pattern appeared at the edge of the display, an elongated heat signature moving through what should have been solid wall. "There," Lyra highlighted the anomaly. "It's in the maintenance conduits between levels, heading toward the low-gravity research chamber." "Makes sense," Jax reasoned. "Those chambers have separate environmental systems. If it can reach them, it could potentially access the exterior airlocks." "It's trying to escape the Academy entirely," Lyra realized. "We need to intercept it before security discovers the same thing." They downloaded the thermal scan data to a portable device and hurried out of the biolab. The low-gravity chambers were located on the same level, in the physics department wing, currently outside the security perimeter, according to Jax's stolen access to the security network. As they approached the physics wing, the emergency lighting suddenly switched from red to normal illumination, and the automated announcements ceased. "That's not good," Jax muttered. "Either security managed to restore normal systems, or our friend is manipulating the environmental controls again." Lyra finished. "It knows we're coming." The doors to the low-gravity research chamber stood open, revealing the specialized airlock system designed to maintain the delicate gravity field within. Unlike the lecture hall's institutional sterility, this room was a marvel of engineering, a spherical chamber with instrumentation embedded in the walls and multiple levels of platforms floating in concentric circles around a central experimental area. "Should we wait for security?" Jax whispered, suddenly less confident now that they were potentially moments away from confronting the creature. Lyra shook her head. "If security arrives first, they'll treat it as hostile. This might be our only chance for peaceful contact." She took a deep breath. "I'm going in. You can stay here if you want." To her surprise, Jax straightened his shoulders. "Not a chance, Vance. Someone needs to make sure you don't get yourself killed playing diplomat." They stepped through the airlock together, immediately feeling the disorienting effect of the reduced gravity field. Their movements became buoyant, each step threatening to send them floating gently upward. "Eno?" Lyra called out, her voice echoing strangely in the spherical chamber. "We know you're here. We want to talk." For several seconds, nothing happened. Then, a patch of wall near the central platform began to ripple and distort. The creature emerged, not bothering with human appearance now, its multiple limbs anchoring it to the wall as its body extended outward. "You are either very brave or very foolish," the creature observed, its voice reverberating from no discernible source. Security forces are currently searching for me with lethal authorization. We know, Lyra confirmed, carefully using the handrails to navigate toward one of the floating platforms. That's why we came to find you first. We don't believe you deserve to be hunted down. Fascinating, the creature replied. Your species simultaneously studies others as specimens, while demonstrating individual capacity for empathy. A contradiction. Jack snorted. That's humans for you, walking contradictions. The creature undulated closer, moving with fluid grace through the low-gravity environment. In this setting, free from the constraints of mimicking human form, its movements seemed natural, even beautiful in a completely alien way. Why have you sought me? It asked, hovering at a distance that was close enough for conversation, but far enough to be non-threatening. Lyra chose her words carefully. I believe that what happened in the lecture hall was a misunderstanding on both sides. You're not what our classification system labeled you as, and we're not what you might think based on how you've been treated. An accurate assessment, the creature acknowledged. Your academy captured an immature member of my species, assuming limited intelligence because our cognitive processes do not register on your neural scanning technology. You came to rescue the captured specimen, Lyra guessed. To observe and evaluate, the creature corrected. Rescue was a secondary objective if conditions warranted. However, upon arrival, I discovered the specimen had expired during transport. Your preservation techniques are incompatible with our biology. Lyra felt a pang of genuine regret. I'm sorry, that was never the intention. Intention is irrelevant to outcome, the creature stated, though its tone held no apparent resentment. However, the opportunity to study your species directly was unexpected. I assumed the identity you knew as Eno to gather information. About what? Jax asked, having maneuvered to a platform opposite Lyra's, effectively flanking the creature without appearing to threaten it. Your technology, your cognitive patterns, your social hierarchies. The creature's form rippled in what might have been a gesture of emphasis. My world has detected your expansion through neighboring systems. We needed to understand if you represented a threat. And what did you conclude? Lyra asked, holding her breath. Inconclusive, the creature replied. Your species contains both those who would destroy what they fear and those who would understand what they do not know. I require more data. A distant alarm began to sound, and the chamber's lighting flickered briefly. Security has detected unauthorized access to this section, the creature announced. They will arrive in approximately 7 minutes. Lyra thought quickly. We need to establish a formal contact protocol before they get here, something that will force them to follow diplomatic procedures rather than security containment. You are suggesting an alliance? The creature sounded almost amused. I'm suggesting communication instead of conflict, Lyra corrected. Professor Carrick mentioned first contact protocols. If we can invoke those, it would require the Academy to treat you as a diplomatic entity rather than a security threat. You assume your authorities will honor such protocols when faced with fear. They will if they have no choice, Jax interjected. Academy regulations are clear. Once first contact protocols are initiated, military action becomes a galactic incident rather than an internal security matter. Lyra looked at him in surprise. Jax shrugged. I may skip some classes, but interspecies law isn't one of them. To formally invoke these protocols, the creature said, would require verification of sentience and technological capacity. Your security forces currently believe I am merely a dangerous animal. Then we need to demonstrate otherwise, Lyra decided, undeniably. She glanced around the chamber, her eyes settling on the central control console floating in the middle of the room. The gravity controls, could you manipulate them precisely enough to create a recognizable pattern, something that couldn't be dismissed as random behavior? The creature's form shifted, extending a limb toward the console. What pattern would be sufficiently convincing? Mathematical sequences are universal, Lyra suggested. Prime numbers, the Fibonacci sequence. Or, Jax interrupted with a sudden grin, we could go for something more direct. He pushed off from his platform, floating across to the main environmental controls. If you can access the Academy-wide announcement system from here, why not just tell everyone directly? The creature undulated in what might have been consideration. A direct approach has certain efficiency. However, it would reveal capabilities that might increase fear response. They already know you can mimic humans and interface with technology, Lyra pointed out. Being open about your abilities might actually reduce fear by eliminating unknowns. After a moment's hesitation, the creature extended multiple limbs toward the control panel. The system lit up with activity, displays flickering as data streamed across them too quickly for human eyes to follow. Academy security override in progress, an automated voice announced. Unauthorized access detected. Can you bypass that? Jax asked nervously, eyeing the door. Easily, the creature replied, its limbs blurring across the controls. Your security architecture is predictable. The overhead speakers crackled, and then the creature's resonant voice echoed throughout the chamber, and, Lyra suspected, throughout the entire Academy. Attention, Galactic Academy personnel. I am the entity classified in your system as Deathworld Monster number 37. This designation is incorrect. I represent an advanced civilization from the world you designate as XZ79. We are sentient, technologically capable, and wish to establish formal diplomatic relations under Section 12 of the Galactic Accords governing First Contact Protocols. Lyra held her breath, waiting for the response. For several seconds, there was only silence. Then the chamber doors slid open, and a security team burst in, weapons raised, only to freeze in confusion at the scene before them. 2 students floating calmly near a creature that was clearly manipulating Academy technology while broadcasting throughout the facility. "Stand down!" came a sharp command from behind the security team. Professor Carrick pushed his way through, followed by a stern-looking woman Lyra recognized as Dr. Ilara Voss, the Academy's Director of Interspecies Relations. "Security protocols suspended," Dr. Voss announced, her authoritative voice cutting through the tension. "First contact procedures are now in effect. All armed personnel will withdraw immediately." The security team hesitated, clearly reluctant to leave students in proximity to what they still perceived as a threat. "That was not a suggestion," Voss added coldly. "Withdrawal now." With obvious reluctance, the security team backed out of the chamber. Dr. Voss approached the edge of the gravity field, studying the creature with clinical interest rather than fear. "I am Dr. Ilara Voss, authorized representative of the Galactic Academy and certified first contact specialist." She introduced herself formally. "Am I addressing a fully empowered representative of your species?" The creature's form stabilized into a more defined shape, still entirely non-humanoid, but with what appeared to be specialized communication appendages oriented toward Voss. "I am designated observer-interpreter, authorized to establish preliminary diplomatic connections," it responded. "My full designation is untranslatable in your phonetic system." "I understand." Voss nodded. "For the record, do you wish to be addressed by a specific title or designation during these proceedings?" The creature seemed to consider this. "The designation Eno is acceptable as a convenience." "Very well. Observer Eno," Voss continued with impressive composure. "I formally acknowledge your invocation of first contact protocols and recognize your status as a diplomatic representative. The Academy's response to your presence will now be governed by galactic accords rather than internal security procedures." Lyra could hardly believe what she was witnessing. A formal diplomatic exchange with a species that, hours earlier, had been classified as little more than a dangerous animal. Professor Carrick looked simultaneously shocked and elated, the academic in him clearly overriding any lingering fear. "Students Vance and Morell," Voss addressed them without taking her eyes off Eno. "Your presence here requires explanation." They sought to prevent conflict. Eno answered before either student could speak. "They recognized my sentience and intelligence when others did not. Their intervention was appreciated." Voss raised an eyebrow but nodded. "Their actions will be reviewed in proper context. Then, for now, I must ask both of you to withdraw to the observation chamber. First contact protocols require minimizing participants during initial exchange." Lyra hesitated, reluctant to leave now that events had taken such an unexpected turn. She looked to Eno, who extended a limb in what might have been a gesture of reassurance. "Your assistance has been valuable, Lyra Vance," the creature said. "Our paths will cross again in a more formal capacity, I expect." Using the handrails, Lyra and Jax made their way to the chamber exit, where Professor Carrick waited. "That was either the most foolhardy or the most brilliant action I've ever seen from first-year students," Carrick told them quietly, his expression a mix of concern and admiration. "You could have been killed." "It was never hostile, Professor," Lyra insisted. "It was studying us, just as we study other species." "A humbling reversal of perspective," Carrick acknowledged, "one that will force a complete re-evaluation of our classification system. If one Deathworld species possesses this level of intelligence and technology, how many others have we mischaracterized?" As they entered the observation room adjacent to the chamber, Lyra watched through the transparent wall as Dr. Voss established formal communication protocols with Eno. The creature moved with fluid grace in the low gravity, its form shifting subtly as it communicated. "What happens now?" Jax asked, standing beside her. "I mean, we basically just had first contact with an alien civilization inside a classroom. That's got to be unprecedented." "Everything changes," Carrick answered solemnly. "Classification systems, research protocols, ethical guidelines, the entire field of xenobiology will need to be reimagined, and you two will be at the center of it, I suspect." Lyra barely heard him, her attention fixed on the diplomatic exchange unfolding before them. Something profound had shifted in her understanding of the universe and her place in it. The line between observer and observed, between student and subject, had blurred beyond recognition. "You know," Jax said, interrupting her thoughts, "for someone from a garden world, you showed surprising courage back there. Guess we were all wrong about you. Vance." "Just as we were wrong about Eno," she replied softly. "Maybe that's the real lesson here, that our categories and classifications say more about our limitations than about the things we're trying to understand." Hours later, after extensive debriefing and medical examinations, Lyra sat alone in her dormitory, recording her observations of the day's events. Official Academy policy prohibited sharing details of the first contact proceedings, but students had been encouraged to document their personal experiences for the historical record. A soft chime indicated a message on her data tablet. It was from Professor Carrick. "Student Vance, your insights during today's unprecedented events have demonstrated exceptional potential. Dr. Voss has requested your participation in the newly established communication liaison team for our guest. Please report to Xenobiology Special Projects tomorrow at 0800 hours if you wish to accept this position. Additionally, the Classification Committee would welcome your input on revisiting our approach to Deathworld species categorization. You have, quite literally, changed how we see the universe. Well done." Below Carrick's message was a note from Jax. "Vance, looks like we're both on this liaison team thing. Try not to get us eaten on the first day. Garden Girl, Morell." Lyra smiled despite her exhaustion. In a single day, everything had changed. Her understanding of her field, her place at the academy, and perhaps most significantly, her perception of the boundaries between us and them. She added a final entry to her personal record. Today we taught a class about Deathworld monsters, unaware one was in the room. But the real discovery wasn't the creature among us. It was the recognition that monster is a classification born of ignorance, not science. Eno came seeking understanding and found students quick to fear and slow to comprehend. Yet in that failure lies our greatest opportunity to redefine our relationship with the universe beyond our comfortable boundaries. Tomorrow we begin again, not as students studying specimens, but as species meeting as equals in the vast, strange wonder of existence. She closed her journal and looked out the window at the stars visible beyond the Academy's force field. Somewhere out there was Eno's homeworld, filled with beings who had been watching humanity's expansion with the same cautious curiosity that humans had applied to them. The thought was both humbling and exhilarating. For the first time since arriving at the Academy, Lyra felt a sense of belonging, not because she had proven herself to her peers, but because she had glimpsed a universe far more complex and wondrous than even the Academy's advanced curriculum had prepared her to understand. And in that vast unknown, there was room for a girl from a garden world who questioned what others assumed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new protocols, and perhaps new understanding. But tonight, Lyra simply gazed at the stars and wondered how many other monsters were looking back, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves as something far more remarkable than humanity had ever imagined.